On a single Saturday morning, an entire country nearly collapsed. 12,000 fighters attacked a republic from all corners, armed with sophisticated weapons backed by technology that not many countries in Africa can afford. Suicide bombers, coordinated gunfire, a defense minister killed in his own home, the capital under siege, and somewhere in the chaos, Russian mercenaries caught in the crossfire. But Russia's response was swift and decisive, deploying helicopters, light vehicles, multiple weapons, wiping some 1,000 attackers and 100+ vehicles. This is the story of how Mali came within inches of falling apart, and what Russia's role in it all really tells us about who the true African partner is and who is destabilizing the Sahel. The big question is, how did militiamen and rebels get all these sophisticated weapons? Who backed them, and what was the motive? Stay with me. For over a decade, Mali has been torn apart by two separate wars happening at the same time. In the north, ethnic Tuareg separatists who have long sought to carve out their own independent homeland called Azawad. And overlapping with that, jihadist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS who have exploited the chaos to expand their territory and recruit fighters. The French and UN forces claimed to deploy to help contain the crisis. But then something shifted. The French, just like their European and American counterparts, were not really there to defend, but to exploit. In 2020 and again in 2021, Mali's military seized power in back-to-back coups. General Assimi Goïta became the face of the junta. The French were kicked out. The UN peacekeepers followed. And in their place, Russian mercenaries. This is where the story gets complicated and deeply geopolitical. Unlike his predecessors, President Assimi Goïta, committed to fighting off the insurgency, turned to Russia. Specifically, the Wagner Group was hired, a private Russian mercenary outfit with a brutal reputation and a growing footprint across Africa. Wagner fighters flooded into Mali. The Tuareg separatists and the jihadists were driven out of crucial towns. And in late 2023, they scored what looked like a major victory, capturing Kidal, the symbolic unofficial capital of the separatist movement, a city the rebels had held for over a decade. But Wagner wouldn't stay Wagner for long. In June 2023, Wagner's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, launched a short-lived mutiny against the Russian military leadership. Months later, he was dead. His plane went down in what many believe was no accident. After Prigozhin's death, the Russian government absorbed Wagner's African operations into a new structure, the Africa Corps, now directly under Russia's defense ministry, overseen by Deputy Defense Minister Yunusbek Yevkurov and run operationally by Major General Andrei Avyaranov, a key figure in Russian military intelligence. The name changed. The mission didn't. Russia was still there, still embedded with Mali's military, still pulling the strings and still being paid, not just in cash, but in access to Mali's gold, diamonds, and uranium. While Russia extracted and benefited from these minerals in exchange for loyalty and defense capabilities, anger was brewing in Paris. How could Russia, largely considered an enemy of the West, be in charge of resources that had long powered European economies? France, along with its European allies, convened what many describe as a destabilization campaign, targeting not only Mali, but also its allies Burkina Faso and Niger. Since 2023, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has reportedly survived more than 20 assassination attempts. Niger has faced major insurgent escalations. In 2025, the Malian military alongside Wagner fighters came under heavy enemy fire after Ukraine allegedly shared critical intelligence and targeting information with Tuareg rebels. All this was carried out with both external and internal support from Ivory Coast and Benin. This brings us to the biggest question of the century. Is this a rebellion or a French and European-backed operation aimed at installing a puppet government in Mali to continue the exploitation of its resources? To answer this question, we need to look deeper into the circumstances surrounding this attack. Analysts who study the Sahel described what happened next as the largest coordinated jihadist attack on Mali in years. It wasn't one attack, it was everywhere, all at once.
In Kati, a town just outside Bamako and home to Mali's most important military base, a truck packed with explosives drove directly into the residence of Defense Minister Sadio Kamara. He exchanged fire with the attackers. He killed some of them, but he was wounded in the explosion and later died in hospital. 3 of his family members were also killed. The blast collapsed his entire residence and destroyed a nearby mosque, killing worshippers inside. At the same time, General Assimi Goïta, the head of the junta himself, had his own home targeted. He was rushed to a secure location. Meanwhile, across the country, in Gao, gunfire and explosions. In Sevari and Mopti, attacks reported. In Kidal, separatist fighters of the Azawad Liberation Front, FLA, launched a major offensive. And in Bamako itself, Al-Qaeda's affiliate, JNIM, declared the beginning of what they called a total siege of the capital, warning civilians to stay out of the way. This wasn't chaos. This was choreography. The jihadists and the separatists, usually rivals, appear to have coordinated their strikes for maximum impact. Strike everywhere, overwhelm the response, decapitate the leadership. It almost worked. But they forgot just one thing: Russia. Unlike European and American partners who promise and don't deliver, Russia presents itself as the opposite, delivering as promised. In Kidal, the separatist FLA launched their assault, and they met Malian army troops and Africa Corps mercenaries head-on. 2 days of fierce clashes followed. Then, something unexpected happened. The FLA announced that an agreement had been reached. The Africa Corps would withdraw from Kidal safely, with their wounded and heavy equipment evacuated. The separatists declared Kidal is now free. That is an understatement. Now, here's the key question. Was this a defeat or a strategic withdrawal? To answer this properly, you need to understand who the Africa Corps are. This is a private military group formerly known as Wagner, later renamed and placed under the direct command of Russia's Ministry of Defense. This means every bullet they fire and every move they make is carefully coordinated at the highest level. Using real-time surveillance, Moscow was likely aware that this was not an ordinary rebellion, but a complex geopolitical confrontation involving multiple actors. The withdrawal of the Africa Corps can be interpreted as a strategic move to secure the capital and other key cities, ensuring the broader defense of Mali could continue. And yes, 2 days later, Russia's Ministry of Defense released a statement and footage of a military operation against rebels in Mali. The statement confirmed the deployment of helicopters as well as light and heavy weaponry, including grenade launchers for sustained strikes against rebel positions. The result? The enemy was repelled. Over 1,000 fighters were reportedly killed. More than 100 vehicles, dozens of motorcycles, and 2 armored vehicles were destroyed. The presidential palace remained well defended. By Monday morning, the capital Bamako had returned to an uneasy calm. Schools reopened, offices resumed operations. Military checkpoints that had sprung up over the weekend were quietly dismantled. The Africa Corps stated it was continuing operations elsewhere in the country. But one thing that mainstream media is not paying attention to is what some describe as Western media narratives about Mali. Major outlets like BBC, Reuters, and CNN published headlines such as, "How are we going to get back home? Islamist group tightens blockade on Mali capital. Russian mercenaries accused of cold-blooded killings in Mali. BBC speaks to eyewitnesses. What next for Mali's military leaders after shock rebel offensive? France urges citizens to leave Mali after rebel attacks. Russian fighters confirm withdrawal from northern Mali city after separatist attacks. Mali defense minister killed as country hit by a wave of rebel attacks. Armed groups launch coordinated attacks across Mali. These and many more were not just headlines, but according to some interpretations, tools intended to shape perception and influence morale. But despite all that, President Assimi Goïta emerged strong, delivering a speech during the send-off of the fallen defense minister. Elsewhere in the AES territory, Niger and Burkina Faso tightened security, anticipating similar destabilization attempts. But what happened in Mali over that extraordinary weekend tells us something important about the world we are living in. The old order, Western military presence, UN peacekeeping missions, and French influence in its former colonies is being challenged across the Sahel. And the new order emerging in its place, involving Russian partnerships, military-led governments, and shifting alliances, is still evolving. Caught in the middle of all this are ordinary Malians, in Bamako's markets, in Kidal streets, and in the villages of the north, who simply want to live their lives without explosions, checkpoints, and sieges. Whether any external partner or internal authority can truly deliver lasting peace remains the unanswered question. If you found this video informative, please like and subscribe, and drop a comment below. What do you think Russia's real agenda in Africa is? Let's talk about it.